Bonjour. Ah, cool. Bienvenue tout le monde. Déjà la 5e édition de notre magnifique PPFS. Donc je vais commencer la session un peu en français, même si on a Ryan qui vient après nous parler en anglais. Mais voilà, je vais commencer bien sûr, parce qu'un événement francophone, donc on va commencer en français. Que dire de beau? Déjà, un truc important. Bien sûr, on le reprécise chaque année, mais c'est très important. L'événement n'aurait pas lieu sans nos magnifiques sponsors. Ils sont tous des stands quasiment dehors, sur l'autographe Bleu. Donc, je vais remercier aussi, bien sûr, Microsoft qui nous soutient comme d'habitude chaque année dans plein de choses. Déjà, rien d'être là ici dans ce lieu. On retrouve bien sûr des sponsors qui sont là depuis le début. Je pense notamment aux Wakers, à Mocha ici, à Dinagil et d'autres. Et donc d'ailleurs, pour compléter la suite, je vais inviter notre magnifique sponsor Expert Time Orange à venir sur scène pour parler donc, de leur entreprise. Tu peux prendre. Voilà, on peut applaudir.
Merci.
Très bien.
Merci Aurélien, bonjour à tous. Alors en effet, nous, ça fait 4 ans qu'on est partenaire de l'événement et partenaire et sponsor Platinum cette année. Donc pour ma part, Ludovic Coppola, je suis responsable des activités low-code au sein d'Expert Time. Expert Time étant un pure player Microsoft depuis 20 ans. Et donc on accompagne nos clients autour de projets de cadrage, de conseils et de réalisation autour des environnements Microsoft. Et cela fait 1 an qu'on est filiale d'Orange Business, ce qui nous permet aujourd'hui d'avoir une offre de plus en plus complète et large autour des solutions Microsoft, Power Platform, Dynamics et d'autres.
Ouais, excuse-moi, c'est moi qui l'ai.
Et du coup, alors on m'a laissé 1 minute,
voilà.
Donc je vais faire rapide. Et du coup, n'hésitez pas à nous retrouver sur le stand qui est juste en sortie de Grand Bleu pour échanger, sachant que cette année, vous pourrez nous retrouver sur 7 sessions autour de différentes thématiques. On parlera Digital Factory, on parlera Microsoft Fabric, on parlera de l'IA et de Copilot Studio. Plein de belles choses, donc n'hésitez pas à venir nous retrouver. Et puis au plaisir de se croiser sur le stand. Et voilà, bon événement à tous.
Merci.
Merci.
Merci. Hop, un truc important, puisque je tiens à repréciser encore une fois que l'événement est organisé côté communauté. Donc il y a plusieurs associations en France qui travaillent bénévolement. Qu'on peut d'ailleurs applaudir chaleureusement. Donc c'est... Alors au bout de 5 éditions, on est quand même un peu plus, un peu mieux organisé, si j'ose dire. C'est un peu plus... ça tombe sur les rails. Ça prend du temps, des soirées, des week-ends, pour que vous soyez tous là présents à Paris, ou même en ligne. Je salue d'ailleurs tous les gens qui nous regardent actuellement en live, en ligne, parce qu'on ne peut pas accueillir... autant de monde dans l'amphi, donc ça veut dire que l'année prochaine, il faut qu'on trouve encore plus grand. J'ai eu beaucoup de demandes, tiens, tu n'aurais pas un ticket à la dernière minute? Donc voilà, donc ça fait plaisir en tout cas de voir tout ce monde ici. Et donc voilà, c'est ces slides que vous allez voir. Donc, pourquoi on les rediffuse à chaque fois? C'est important, comme je le disais. Vous avez, moi je suis le président de la BISAF French Community. Donc, on est bien mettre des noms anglais, Power Platform, French Summit, BISAF, French Community. Bon, c'est un événement français, mais on met bien des mots anglais. Donc n'hésitez pas. Nous, je sais que David Vachala m'a rejoint il y a quelques années. Alan, on a Raphaël Potin, qu'on salue d'ailleurs, qui est au Canada, qui ne peut pas être là cette année. Je sais qu'il regardera sûrement en replay parce qu'il doit être en train de dormir actuellement. Et puis ensuite, on a les communautés AMP que vous allez retrouver beaucoup dans les salles, dans les sessions et surtout en modération. Puisque pareil, il y a besoin forcément pour toutes ces sessions que vous allez voir pendant ces 2 jours d'avoir des gens aussi pour aider dans la modération, pour le live, etc. Et nos amis jaunes du Club Power BI qui nous suivent et qui nous aident. Et je n'ai pas updaté cette slide, mais il manque le Club Fabrique maintenant, puisque vous avez peut-être pu voir qu'ils ont créé une autre association pour la partie fabrique depuis quelques temps. Donc je vous invite à les suivre. Et j'ai quasiment fini avant que Ryan came here. Donc le PPFS, pour info, la 5e édition, on est à 492 personnes en physique. Alors ça, c'est ceux qui ont des badges. Bon, j'ai cru voir qu'il y a certains qui ont peut-être des badges ou problèmes de badge, donc il y aura peut-être même plus que 492. Donc ça, c'est sur les gens qui ont tous un badge, ils sont censés venir au moins une fois dans les 2 jours. Hein. On ne sera pas les 492 aujourd'hui. Hein. Il y en a qui viennent que demain pour la journée technique. Mais 777 en ligne. Et pour info, c'est 100, 150 personnes en plus par rapport à l'année dernière. Donc voilà, toujours une croissance importante. La Business Challenge Community, après 5 éditions, on est à plus de 3000 personnes, 6000 personnes, pardon, dont 3000 sociétés. Voilà, qui ont soit vu un webinar, que ce soit le French Power Bread que David Vachala a eu la super idée d'organiser il y a déjà 3 ans. On va, comme Netflix, on va bientôt arriver à la 4e saison l'année prochaine. Donc pour info, French Power Break, pour ceux qui ne connaissent pas, c'est un webinar qu'on fait tous les derniers mercredis du mois, de 13 à 14, avec 2 speakers. On recherche toujours des speakers. David, il passe un temps considérable à essayer de trouver des speakers. Voilà, parce que le but, c'est bien sûr c'est pour la communauté, par la communauté. Donc l'idée, c'est que voilà, tout le monde peut y participer. Je sais que cette année, on a eu du mal encore à faire l'agenda, à prendre toutes les sessions possibles. Donc voilà, donc, je sais qu'on a forcément fait des malheureux, malheureuses, ne pas pouvoir faire leur session ici au PPFS. Donc voilà, il y a notamment le French Power Break qui est une bonne chose. Le PPFC, je salue Monsieur Casquette Rouge, Red Cap, Emmanuel Galis, que vous connaissez peut-être, qui vient tout le temps. Malheureusement, il n'est pas là cette année, mais je suis sûr qu'il est en train de me regarder et de me dire si je ne dis pas de bêtises. C'est son petit bébé, le ppfc.fr. Pour ceux qui ne connaissent pas, hein, c'est un forum français où il y a maintenant 1429 membres. L'année dernière, ils étaient 900. Vous avez vu le stat à droite, on a quand même un sacré nombre de réponses et de discussions. Donc voilà, c'est un forum, pareil pour la communauté, par la communauté. Ils recherchent actuellement un développeur WordPress, hein, que comme je disais, c'est du bénévolat, hein, la communauté. Donc si quelqu'un est quelqu'un qui est à fond sur WordPress et qui a du temps libre ces week-ends et soirées, il recherche notamment Emmanuel. Donc vous n'hésitez pas à contacter Emmanuel Galis si vous voulez aider à peaufiner ce forum. Et donc c'est une vraie mine d'or. Hein. Comme je disais, il y a beaucoup de membres dedans, il y a beaucoup de personnes qui répondent rapidement en français. Donc c'est assez impressionnant. Le YouTube, on a atteint les 2000 abonnés depuis ce matin, je crois. Le LinkedIn aussi, ça fait déjà un petit moment. Donc voilà, c'est une communauté, un événement qui grossit petit à petit. Donc merci à tout le monde de nous suivre. Et merci. Et on a une petite nouveauté, mais il faudra attendre demain soir. Voilà, on a une petite... sinon, c'est pas drôle. Donc demain soir, il y aura une keynote de clôture, on va dire, un peu informelle. Hein. Et donc on fera une petite annonce sympathique. Bon, le petit teasing, c'est que tout le monde n'habite pas à Paris. Point. Voilà. Et avant de passer à Ryan, mes dernières slides, et en plus, je vais même être à l'heure pour une fois. Donc oui, comme je le disais, il n'y a pas que la Business Challenge Community, il y a la communauté AMP. Je crois qu'ils ont atteint leur 99e. Ouais. Ah, je te cherchais, Patrick. Ah. Donc bientôt 100, voilà. Donc impressionnant. Bon, nous, on a fait moins que vous, mais voilà. C'est vrai que l'AMP, vous avez peut-être pu voir, voilà, ils sont la tournée du monde régulièrement, où ils font des super événements. Et le Club Power BI et Club Fabric, comme je parlais. J'ai trouvé le Club Fabric, alors j'espère que c'est le bon logo, mais normalement oui. Et donc d'ailleurs, j'en profite, le Club Power BI et Club Fabric, ce soir, on a une super table ronde avec eux. En fait, ils font toujours des meet-up, le Club Fabric et le Club Power BI. Et ce soir, le meet-up aura lieu durant le PPFS à 18h. Avec du coup Tristan, Jean-Pierre Riel, enfin voilà, tous nos amis jaunes et verts. Et j'en ferai partie d'ailleurs, donc on aura une belle table ronde entre des gens Dynamics, Power Platform et Data, tous ensemble, pour parler des sujets fabrique et data avec la Power Platform. And finish. Now, your turn, Ryan.
Merci, merci.
Merci.
Bonjour. Croissant. Merci. That's all of my French. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today. And thank you for spending time away from your day jobs and families and coming into the city and being with each other. It is just a real privilege to be here with all of you today. We've got a really ambitious agenda for just 30 minutes, and I want to share a lot of what we've been up to in the engineering team and some of the exciting new things that we've just announced and are rolling out in Power Platform. I want to share a lot of customer stories. I want to do some live demo of brand new stuff actually running in code. But most importantly, I just want to share gratitude with all of you for what you do for Power Platform. It is very true that this platform runs on and has been built very closely together with our community. And we take that very seriously in the engineering team. We don't just want to sit in an ivory tower and create software we think is neat. We want to really understand what will make people's lives better, what will make your organizations better, and invest accordingly. And that has really helped propel this community to amazing heights already. It is awesome to be in a full room here in Paris. We shared this number at the Power Platform Conference in Las Vegas a few months ago. More than 48 million people log into Power Platform every single month inside of their companies. That's just people using Power Apps or Power Automate or Power BI internally. It doesn't even count the hundreds of millions of people using external services like Power Pages or Copilot Studio. And to put that number in perspective, the last time I was in this room was 5 years ago in 2019. And at that time, there were less than 1 million monthly active users of Power Apps. Today, there are more than 1 million monthly active users of Power Apps just in France. It's come a long way, right? And you are part of that. You have built this community, and what customers are doing is really fantastic. I'll share a couple of quick examples. A customer close to home, Galeries Lafayette, right, is really rethinking a whole bunch of processes from the back office and how purchasing decisions are made, saving hundreds of days a year in efficiency, all the way to frontline employees like tailors doing alterations to make sure they spend less time with paperwork and more time actually serving customers. If we zoom out and take a European and global lens, Heineken in the beverage industry has more than 72,000 monthly active users just of Power Apps, just every single month inside of this company. They have thousands of applications they've rolled out. They've enabled the entire organization with premium capabilities. They did a sample of just 42 of the apps that they'd built and found that just those 42 apps are saving more than 4 million euro a year. And so they're really starting to see customers do much more than simple stuff, right? And really start to build more critical applications that are making a massive difference in the operation of a company. Let's go to Canada and talk about Scotiabank. They have a board mandate to save $1 billion in operating expense over the next 5 years. And they're using Power Platform at the center of that process to really methodically rethink every single manual process and figure out how to compress it using AI, using better applications, using automation, bringing that whole picture together. And they shared that story at the Power Platform Conference as well. So whether it is retail or consumer goods or banking or manufacturing or government, we're seeing customers in all of these categories really start to take what the platform can do seriously and make it a core part of their strategy. And that's important because we have a lot more work to do. As much as we are proud of 48 million monthly active users, that's still a small fraction of humans with screens and jobs. And if you look at the analyst community, IDC says we need to go build and rethink 1 billion pieces of software by 2028, in the next 4 years, because of the expectations that are changing with AI. And that same report says even in half that time, we expect 40% of new software created in business to involve intelligence in the software itself and in the solution itself. And so really what just a year ago was emerging and early is very rapidly becoming mainstream. And that is really shaping a lot of how we think about the product and the investments we make in Power Platform is really looking at that goal, and looking at an AI-first company and what it means to run processes much more efficiently with humans working together with AI. And specifically, working together with both a copilot, a personal assistant, but also with a network of specialized agents. Agents like digital coworkers who do very specific tasks and work together with their human counterparts to make those processes run much more efficiently than they could have before. And that mindset is changing a lot of how we think about software, about how it's built, from more traditional and deterministic programming to things that are AI-centric workspaces, from the way we think about automation, from deterministic and rigid workflows into things that are much more autonomous and can handle variation and can handle unstructured input, and to think about even how we govern these things and secure them and scale them, from being reactive and sort of containing citizen development into really being a primary strategy for how we roll out software in a company. And so we're really doing investment and innovation on all of these fronts. And I want to highlight some of those pieces today. We're thinking about it not just in applications, but really across all of Power Platform. How does that concept of humans working with copilots and commanding a network of agents translate in this much bigger picture? And so we think there's some important shifts that makes, both to the act of creating software, how we create that software, but also what we build in the first place. We're not only going to build the last decade's software faster with AI, we are also going to rethink the things we are creating in the first place. And I actually want to start there today, because really the epicenter of that investment for us is Copilot Studio. And really thinking about creating not just chatbots, but really creating fully autonomous agents that can do very specific tasks inside of a company. And this is a journey we've been on for a while, and we just opened these capabilities into a public preview just within the last few weeks. I'll demo them live in a moment, but it's really cool to see what's possible when you can go beyond just reactive chat. And we think that works on a spectrum of sophistication. From very simple agents that are really about question and answer and knowledge retrieval, all the way up to agents that can do one narrow task over and over again, and then be able to assemble many of those agents into more autonomous agents that can do many tasks in a category. And this will be a journey for all of us as we think about creating these things and putting them into production and optimizing their capabilities. But really, we already see Copilot Studio handling a spectrum of these challenges. And we've had some customers already in early adoption start to implement agents with massive results. The largest utility in the United States has now compressed their internal IT help desk volume by up to 40% using Copilot Studio agents that are not just knowledge retrieval. If you get locked out of your on-prem SAP account at PG&E, an agent will validate your identity and then trigger a Power Automate RPA workflow to process that lockout completely autonomously. And that is saving them up to $1 million a year in what was previously vendor spend to manage that help desk. And it's solving problems for employees much faster. McKinsey is massively reducing the amount of time they spend on project intake. I'll zoom into this middle one, Pets at Home, because everybody likes pets. This is the largest pet care retailer in the UK, using Copilot Studio agents in their fraud detection department, in their returns desk, really starting to reduce excessive spend, and they believe they are already on path to save £1 million a year, just in revenue loss avoidance based on the agents that they're implementing. So again, across the spectrum, this is not just a science project. There are real capabilities rolling into market and customers that are using them at huge scale. But not everything will be an agent. Not everything will be just something running behind the scenes or a chatbot. And we're also really looking at shifting expectations into how you create more traditional automation and what that automation can do as well. And so we've really been focusing in Power Automate on expanding out that experience of being an automation developer using generative AI. And one of the capabilities that we're really excited about is what we call generative actions. To be able to take even a traditional automation, when a new record comes to the database or when an action is fired, to be able to then create an action that leverages generative AI in a very specific way. When a refund request comes in the door at Pets at Home, go look at our refund policy and recommend whether we should honor the request based on what's in the policy document, and then pass that on to the next steps of the automation. So this really starts to open up capabilities that traditionally were very prohibitive or difficult to encode in traditional automation. We can now start to move further and automate even those things as well. But we're not even stopping at generative actions. We're also looking at how do we understand processes that happen inside of these organizations already today in a much easier way. And one of the capabilities that we're very excited about is we record with Copilot in the Power Automate desktop, which is very different than traditional RPA development that tried to track exactly what people were clicking on inside of different applications on their screen. When I record with Copilot, it's like I'm on a Teams call with AI. And I show my screen, my whole screen, and I talk out loud about my process. Every Tuesday I download a data from this system, and then I change these columns, then I upload something over here. And AI will understand both that transcription and the visuals of what's happening on the screen and map the process and generate an automation as a result. And that automation itself will not even be fixed. One of the other really cool capabilities is self-healing of those automations as they run. If anybody has done an RPA project before in the traditional world, you know that they can be very brittle. One small thing changes about a user experience and a traditional UI automation will break. In a world of agents and AI, we can understand it wasn't just this div in the UX that changed, it was the submit button that changed and it moved over here. And we can understand that change and report it back to a maker and have the maker validate it and keep that automation moving. So just, again, reducing massive amounts of cost even in traditional automation spaces. So we'll keep moving quickly here and talk about some customers that are doing this at huge scale. HSBC is using some of those capabilities, including the record with Copilot, to go document and understand all of the current inefficiencies in many of their processes. And this is the largest commercial lender on the planet, and they've been in business for about 130 years. They have a lot of complex systems and a lot of complex processes. And using technology like this, they have been able to dramatically reduce the amount of time spent in core business processes like loan origination. In fact, they now have a Power Platform layer of Power Automate and Power Apps that manages end-to-end the commercial loan origination process in 36 global markets. And they believe that they have compressed the time it takes to do that process by half, saving hundreds of thousands of hours a year and driving massive efficiency as a competitive advantage inside of the bank. And that's just one of hundreds of use cases that they're using Power Platform for right now. And so, again, this is having a big impact in organizations today at a level that is far beyond, what we traditionally thought of as citizen development. Now, we're also looking at how these things come together and how they come together in intelligent applications. And so I'll talk a bit about Power Apps here, and then we'll show all of these things, or at least a good chunk of them, running live in some real code. But look, even for all of the automation in the world and all of the copilots and agents in the world, software will not go away completely. People will still need to look at information in a structured way. We will still need to submit information in a structured way. We'll still need to make decisions and have tools that are not just chat. But we need to even think a lot more bold about how we create those things and what they can do for users. And this is where one of the most exciting things that we've rolled out this fall, in fact, it's rolling into a public preview this month within the next few weeks, is what we call the Plan Designer in Power Apps, where rather than traditionally creating software, even in Power Apps, starting at a blank page in a project and dragging components onto the screen, we're starting to go much earlier in the process. Let's understand a business problem in the first place. Let's understand what we do today around that problem, and then generate a plan. Generate user stories and personas and multiple different assets and data models to go address that plan in Power Platform. And also looking at how we make the assets that are created themselves intelligent. How do we make it so that users and applications are not manually typing into boxes all the time or manually pulling reports, but that we're using agents just built in out of the box into those applications to help make those processes run more efficiently. And even how do we generate custom agents from existing apps that start to make manual processes much more automated and bring this whole thing full circle. And so to kind of show this off, I want to focus on another customer here, another bank, Wells Fargo. And they were on stage with us at Ignite just a few weeks ago. In fact, JB, who is the Senior Vice President for Technology in banking branches, talked about how they have now rolled out Copilot Studio agents to more than 4,000 bank branches in Wells Fargo, focused on specific branch procedures and all of the manual work associated with those procedures. And this is on top of an organization that has, again, licensed 100% of the company with full Power Apps premium capabilities, that has more than 1,900 environments managed with managed environments and has thousands of applications rolled out. They're now taking that next step to really bring agents and AI into the platform. And so we'll use this story to sort of look at what all this stuff can do in actual code and actual running software. So I'm going to switch my screen here, and we'll take a tour through it. So we'll do a couple of things. We'll use the Plan Designer to build a plan for branch procedures at Wells Fargo. And then we'll drill into one of those specific procedures and look at how Copilot Studio agents are making the process much more efficient. So this is the new Plan Designer front door in Power Apps. It's just right at the front of powerapps.com. I can start typing into a box to describe an existing business problem. And I'm going to use a little script here so you don't have to listen to me talk and type at the same time, because that's a disaster. But this is all live code, and this is all running for real, and you'll be able to try it soon in a few weeks. Now, nobody's going to make perfect software off of a single sentence. And that's not the goal. And in fact, even from the beginning, I can start to attach other forms of stimulus. I can attach existing documents. I can attach a data model diagram. I can attach a process diagram, even a photo of a whiteboard. And Copilot will take that input that I've given about the problem, and it will not jump in and start building software. In fact, what it's going to do first is start thinking through the problem like we would as traditional software people. It's going to start asking curious questions like, who are the users in this scenario? And what jobs do they have to do? What are their user stories? And based on just the input that we gave it, one relationship diagram and a sentence, it's actually starting to build out, here's a draft of a plan for this software solution. You probably have a branch manager for those banks who has a certain set of tasks. You have a team member who has additional tasks. And all of this is just a starting point that I can edit with Copilot. So I can go say, hey, that's great, but let's also add a role for the branch procedures team that defines all of the procedures that happen inside of a bank. What does that do to our overall solution? Right? So Copilot will think about that input and think about it in the context of all of the input we've already given it and recalculate the plan and update the plan. And so this becomes a workspace where I can collaborate back and forth with Copilot in a really open-ended way. And it's not just about defining user stories and there it is. It added the additional team member and a whole different set of roles for that procedures team. But that's just the starting point. And what it does from here is that then it starts to create a data model, and it starts to actually design solution architecture on top of that plan. So I'm going to jump forward to one that I created earlier this morning. And this is where we have built out those personas and their user stories, but we've also built out, using a data modeling agent built right into the plan designer, a robust data model in Dataverse, right? And so it's designed all the relationships between the tables that we would need in this scenario. It's even generated sample data so we can wrap our heads around how that would work in a very concrete way. And then it's gone and what we think of as a solution architecture agent has gone and suggested very specific applications and automations to build on top of that data model to address the needs of our users. And in fact, we can zoom in and see exactly what persona and what tables from the data model that the solution architecture agent has recommended that we go build. Right? And then all of this is something that I can just go jump off and create in line. Right? We're not creating an abstract plan, we're creating on Power Platform. Where that data model is not just a design, it's on a planet scale platform with petabytes of sensitive business data in it that scales to millions of monthly active users. And the applications are not just theoretical, we can go generate them here in a few minutes and then tweak them and optimize them in low code. Right? And so there's just an incredible amount of potential to move very fast, taking existing business challenges and existing problems and moving them forward into intelligent applications really quickly. And here, already we've generated this model-driven Power App based off that data model and based off the plan. It's a starting point for us to then go further. Now, I'll skip ahead again to a running version of that app that I've loaded more data into and have built out a little bit more. Because even these apps themselves are intelligent and have agents built in. For one, there's now a data reporting agent built into any grid in a model-driven Power App. And so, say I want to pull a report about forms that are more than 2 years old. Instead of having to do a filter or look at column filters or look at multiple things, I can just type in natural language what I want to see, like I would express it to a data person. I can add additional conditions. I can say, show me the ones from California. And again, instead of having to mess with that query or go to advanced find, I've got just all the capability at my disposal here to whittle down that list in a generative way. And no developer had to anticipate this specific query. The user's just generating it on the fly with an agent behind the scenes. We're also applying that into common situations like data entry. Here is a pretty intimidating form to go create a new power of attorney record in the database. And I don't know about you, but I have not had enough coffee for manual data entry yet this morning, especially because a lot of these forms in the bank are quite complex, right? I've got a multi-page PDF here with lots of different details on it. And traditionally somebody would have to put this form side by side with the application and go through and think about how to fill out all of the fields. Not anymore. Now you see this drop files for smart paste or copy and paste an image or a document. I can just take this document, drop it right here, and an agent in the app is going to analyze the data source that we dropped on and fill out. You can see it found 14 suggested fields in that PDF to fill out in this app. No more manual typing, right? So just really taking all of these individual steps and making them a lot more efficient and a lot faster. But just making human data entry faster is not the end of the road. It's just the beginning. And so one of the other things that we're doing is making it easier, like I said, to generate agents from existing workflow and existing applications. So here's another Power App. This is a Canvas Power App that would be used by a teller in a bank branch to do a lot of different procedures inside of the branch. And one of those procedures that's actually fairly complex is power of attorney. If somebody needs to come do a transaction on an account that they do not own, perhaps an elderly parent has fallen ill or has passed away, and they need to show that they have authority to work with that account. That's a complex process in the bank today. It is both a fraud vector that they need to be careful about, but it's also a really important customer experience because often the person coming into a bank to use a power of attorney has some serious stuff going on in their life, right? And here's what happens historically at a bank, and especially at Wells Fargo. If somebody came in and said, I want to withdraw $15,000 from an account, and here is my power of attorney form, that teller would scan the form into their computer, upload it into an app, and then it would sit in a queue for manual review. And what they would do historically at Bank of America is they would actually get on the phone and they would call a central team in a call center of specialists that are only dedicated to power of attorney validation. And while the customer waits in the bank branch, that specialist is going to manually review this document and score it on a number of different factors, and then decide, should we proceed with the transaction or not? That can easily take 20 minutes every single time of a customer waiting in a bank and somebody manually reviewing a form. That happens 3 or 4 times a day at an average branch. You add that up across the Wells Fargo network, they estimate that's 25,000 hours a week just in power of attorney validation. And all of that outsourced vendor expense for the bank, not to mention poor customer experience. But not anymore. And so now what Wells Fargo can do, or any other customer with an existing Power App where these processes are modeled, can come in and generate an agent directly from the app. And because Power Apps understands already what the processes are and what the data sources that we're connected to are, it can generate instructions and recommendations for the types of very specific task agents that we might create. And not only can it describe them at a high level, it can go look at exactly the metadata of how the forms are constructed, what data sources we're connected to. It can generate very specific instructions for an agent. And again, like everything else we've seen, this is something that a human can edit. I can come in here and add a different instruction. I can say, if you're unsure about any details, then escalate to a human for review, for example. But it's a very powerful starting point to get me going. Now, that takes a few minutes to go create, but luckily I have already built one, and in fact, it's already running behind the scenes over these power of attorney submissions. And I want to come into Copilot Studio directly, because what we're doing is generating agents in Copilot Studio, and talk about what is an agent really. What an agent is it takes those instructions, those natural language instructions. You are a power of attorney validation agent, and here's what you do. But it marries them with very specific knowledge sources. You can draw on our procedure forms. You can draw on our policies sitting in a SharePoint document. It goes to very specific actions. You can't do anything in the world, but you can update a CRM record. You can notify somebody that a decision has been made. And it has a very specific trigger, right? And again, like everything else, all of these are things that I can edit. I can add to. I can add additional SharePoint sources or Dataverse sources, or now I can edit and add from a variety of different systems inside of the bank. Whether that's Microsoft sources or even external sources like a Salesforce or a ServiceNow or a Zendesk. Right? And so I can start to create agents that do very specific tasks, but do them over a very broad range of assets inside of an organization. Now, of course, that's the point where somebody in the back is crossing their arms very skeptically and saying, wait a minute. You're telling me that we're going to build autonomous agents that will work over our most sensitive systems and just about anybody can do this? Are you crazy? I am a little crazy. But actually, this is not happening in a completely open and unstructured way. In fact, everything about this scenario is fully managed, both the agent and the developer. Now, as this agent is running, I can see all of the individual activity of every single run. I can see aggregate analytics of everything this agent did over the last week, over the last month, and how it performed. I can optimize it. But also, as a developer of the agent, I'm operating in a fully managed context. I mentioned that Wells Fargo has almost 2,000 Power Platform environments fully managed. And so you'll notice here that automatically in the interface, I've made some bad decisions intentionally in this agent, and I'm actually blocked from sharing it until I address specific risk. All of that configured in policies by my IT department. In fact, now my company can set a whole set of rules around who gets access to these development environments, what they can connect to, who they can share with, and implement a full set of security across everything that we're doing. More about that in a second, but let's actually go back to this process and refresh the page and see that without us even having to do anything manually, the agent has already reviewed and rejected this particular account withdrawal. And it didn't reject it because the document was invalid. In fact, it is an original copy, but it's explaining its logic here. It's saying, it's a valid document, but it only grants power for real estate transactions, not for bank withdrawals, right? And so you'll have to go produce a different document to proceed in this scenario. So even for an end user, it's able to bring that feedback all the way back into the system and show us what we need to do. Right, and so this is just a really concrete example, and we'll switch back to some slides here for the last few minutes. Oh, I'm not going to print this page. I'm going to extend my monitor. There we go. Even in this scenario, you're seeing how we're creating just a whole lot of value for customers like Wells Fargo. Just for one procedure, compressing 25,000 hours a week, down to a tiny fraction of that is massive cost savings. It's also much better customer experience in the bank branches. And those are the types of opportunities that customers like Wells Fargo are really pursuing. But like I mentioned in the demo, it's not just what we build and how we build it, it's also how we're scaling and governing and securing it. Now, we've had managed environments for a couple of years in Power Platform, and millions of people are now using Power Platform assets that are fully managed with automated governance. One of the big things we did within the last couple of weeks is add managed security and managed operations for DevOps into this picture. We've really updated our understanding of managed environments to be specifically about governance and policies. And so now I'm doing all of this, whether it's app development or automation development or Copilot development, on a fully managed platform that's allowing customers to go much faster at huge scale. Now, we've only got a few minutes, so I'll go through some of these capabilities pretty quickly. But I want to end on a pretty important topic that isn't just about features and software. This is the business day, I understand. So we're going to close talking a little bit about business and how we think about the economics of software. Now, I've had a bunch of examples today of how customers are saving a lot of money with Power Platform, and those aren't just one-offs. In fact, the lead low-code analyst at Forrester Research has independently gone and talked to dozens of Power Platform customers who all spend more than $1 million a year in Power Apps licenses, and has some really impressive data to share about, more than doubling their investment in the platform over a 3-year period and initially paying back their licenses in the first 6 months. But all of that is rearward looking. That's looking at the past. What this same analyst just published was a report looking ahead and saying, look, we expect a lot of things that are point solutions today, that were built by professional developers, either as custom software or as packaged SaaS software. We expect a lot of that to consolidate onto generative low-code platforms within the next few years. And you can read this blog that they've put out there. This one is public. You don't need to be a Forrester customer. They actually quote several Power Apps and Power Platform customers in that analysis. And this is really the traditional build versus buy debate that we've been having inside of IT departments and software teams for a long time. And the truth is that both of these options are bad, historically. Right on the build side, you got the promise of getting exactly what you need, but gosh, it's really expensive. Not just to build it, but then to maintain it forever. And when you're buying SaaS software, you're lucky if you're getting a percentage of what you need, but at least it's somebody else's problem, right? But the problem with this trade-off is not that we're making it once. The problem is that we make it over and over and over again in ways that are totally disconnected, right? Think about a training management solution that you either had to buy from a SaaS company or build yourself. And that orbits around some core HR system like a Workday or what have you. But that's just one thing, right? And we're also making build or buy decisions about many other things around it. Gartner estimates that the average corporate department has at least 8 SaaS apps and 7 on-prem systems that are largely legacy. And that's just the official software in the average, right? What about all the other stuff that orbits around that? All of the Excel spreadsheets and access databases and manual processes, right? And that's just for one department. If you go zoom out and you look at all of the other software running in our companies, we've made those build or buy trade-offs over and over and over again in systems that are not well connected to each other and were not really built in a way that is fully planned. Right? And this is an environment in which Power Platform has originally started to thrive. You know, I can take a Power App and connect it to a few of those systems and build a layer over the top, or I can automate processes across some of them, and now I can create a Copilot Studio agent that does more of that work. And I can start to model data not just in the connected systems, but also in Dataverse. And this is what has propelled a lot of the Power Platform growth, you know, these things popping up in all of these different departments. And you might say, well, isn't that just more clutter? You know, isn't that just more complexity? And the answer is not in the same way, right? Because all of these assets are working on the same managed platform. They share the same security concepts. They share the same packaging concepts. They share the same deployment model. They have the same admin center and governance concepts, right? And so managing them is much easier. Right? And so if you take that Forrester argument forward, what if I could take all the other stuff and not just connect to it, but start replacing it? What if I could take 20% of my SaaS budget and make it go away overnight by rebuilding those things in Power Platform? What if I could take legacy applications and get rid of them and all of the risk that they're associated with and bring them onto Power Platform as well? What if I could take things that don't even need to be software anymore and fully automate them with agents and automation? You know, and I'm doing all of that on one common framework. And from a Power Apps perspective, just one license per user per month, right? That's an incredible advantage to the company and a very different way to think about software. And for us, that's the real reason we're doing all of this. It's why we're building a plan designer and why we have Copilot Studio and why we're talking about agents and automation and everything else. It's not just for feature's sake. It's because we really imagine completely changing this traditional trade-off. You should be able to get exactly what you need and put it on a fully managed platform. And that is what really makes this the time to take a much bigger bet on Power Platform and to really think about, you know, replacing point solutions, rebuilding legacy software, and completely reimagining processes in a way that didn't exist before. But I'll end here where I started. You know, we are just building the tools at the end of the day. It is communities like this one that really put them to work and make them matter. You will change the world with this software. And for that, I'll end where I started, just with a lot of gratefulness for this community. So thank you for being here. Thank you for doing what you do. Have an amazing next couple of days. And we'll see you out there. Cheers. Are we going to selfie?
Cheers. Cheers.